Today we are going to talk about the economic machine. Specifically, we're going to talk about the parts of the machine that break. We often talk about debt crises as if they're natural disasters, unpredictable acts of God that just happen to us. But Ray Dalio's framework, which you see referenced here, argues the exact opposite. These aren't random accidents, they are mechanical. As you look at this simple wave on the screen, I want you to shift your mindset. Don't think of the economy as a chaotic organism. Think of it as a machine with gears and levers. If we can understand the schematic, we can navigate the breakdown. Let's look at the cycle itself. Now, why do we even have cycles? Why isn't growth just a straight line going up? It comes down to human nature and the nature of credit. When you take out a loan, you are essentially pulling consumption forward. You are spending more than you earn today, which means at some point in the future, you have to spend less than you earn to pay it back. That transaction, borrowing from your future self, creates a cycle. As you can see on the chart, the expansion phase is fun. Credit is easy, spending is high. But look at the text box at the top. Debt rises faster than income. This is the math that matters. You can do this for a while, sometimes for decades, but you cannot do it forever. Eventually, the math catches up. That's the peak. The key takeaway here is that while the timing varies, the sequence is logical. It's not predestined to happen on a specific Tuesday in October, but the sequence of events, boom, bubble, bust, deleveraging, is as reliable as the tides. To make this tangible, let's look at the best economic model ever sold in a toy store, Monopoly. If you've played this, you know the feeling. Early in the game, on the left side, you have plenty of cash. You land on a property, you buy it. Why? Because you want to convert cash into assets. You feel wealthy because you own things. Later in the game, in the middle, you've built hotels, but so has everyone else. Suddenly, you land on Boardwalk with a hotel and you owe a massive rent. You have assets, but you have no liquidity. You are forced to sell those assets at a discount just to survive. That is a liquidity crisis. But look at the right side, the key addition. This is where the real world gets dangerous. Imagine if the banker in Monopoly allowed you to borrow money to buy those hotels. You would buy way more hotels, driving prices up, feeling incredibly rich. But your debt would grow to be 5, 10, or 20 times the actual money in the bank. When the squeeze comes, it's not just that you're broke, it's that the entire system is insolvent. That leverage transforms a normal business cycle into a big debt crisis. Now, let's apply that monopoly logic to the real economy. This is the archetype. I want you to focus on the relationship between these two lines. The blue line is the total debt to GDP. The red line is the cost of servicing that debt, the interest payments. During the bubble phase, the blue line skyrockets. People are borrowing massive amounts. But look at the red line. It's relatively low. Why? Because usually interest rates are low and times are good. It feels sustainable. But then we hit the top. The debt burden becomes too heavy. Suddenly, lenders get scared and stop lending. The economy contracts. This leads to the depression phase. Notice how the blue line starts to come down? That is deleveraging. It's painful because the only way to get that line down is to default on promises or stop spending. This gap between the debt we promised to pay and the income we actually have is where the crisis lives. So how do we spot a bubble before it pops? It's actually not that hard if you look for these 7 specific signals. I want you to draw your attention to the list on the right. This is the checklist for the 2007 U.S. housing bubble. It scored a perfect 7 out of 7. Let's look at a few of these. Are prices discounting future rapid appreciation? This means people are buying houses not because they want to live in them, but because they assume the price will go up 20% next year. That is speculation, not investing. Have new participants entered the market? When your cab driver or your dentist start giving you stock tips or telling you about their third investment property, that is a massive red flag. Shadow banking is also crucial. This is lending that happens outside the regulated banks. When standards fall and anyone can get a loan from unregulated entities, the system is fragile.
During this yellow zone, the bubble, a psychological feedback loop takes over. Rising prices encourage borrowing, which fuels higher prices. It feels like magic, but it's just leverage. Then comes the top. What breaks the spell? Almost always, it's the central bank. Look at the annotation, triggered by central bank tightening. The economy gets too hot, inflation creates bubbles, and the central bank raises interest rates to cool it down. But because there's so much debt, raising rates is like tossing a match into a gas station. This triggers the reversal on the right. This logic is precise and deadly. Asset prices fall, so your collateral is worth less. Banks see you as risky, so they stop lending. Without credit, you cut spending. And here's the kicker. One person's spending is another person's income. So when you stop spending, my income drops. I become less creditworthy, so I stop spending. This creates a self-reinforcing downward spiral. That is the definition of a depression. So when that spiral starts, policymakers panic. They have 4 levers to pull, just 4. Austerity, they can tell everyone to tighten their belts. Defaults or restructuring, they can let banks fail and wipe out debt. Money printing, the central bank can create new money. And wealth redistribution, tax the rich to feed the poor. Now please look at the gray box at the bottom. This is the most common mistake in history. Austerity is a mistake on its own. It seems intuitive, right? We borrowed too much, so we should spend less. But because one person's spending is another person's income, if everyone spends less, GDP collapses faster than debt payoff. The debt-to-GDP ratio actually gets worse, not better. You cannot cut your way out of a debt crisis. You have to manage it. So if austerity fails, what works? Dalio calls it a beautiful deleveraging. I know, beautiful is a strange word for a crisis, but it refers to the balance. A beautiful deleveraging happens when you print enough money to offset the pain of the defaults. Look at this chart. The key is the intersection of these 2 lines. The blue line is the nominal interest rate. Let's say it's 5%. The red line is the nominal growth rate. The golden rule is that you need your growth rate to be higher than your interest rate. Think about your own finances. If your debt charges you 5% interest, but your income is growing by 10%, you can grow your way out of the debt. But if your income is shrinking, that 5% interest will eat you alive. You must print money and stimulate the economy enough to get that red line above the blue line. If you do that, debt burdens fall relative to income, and the economy heals. But how does a central bank actually get that growth going? They have a toolkit that evolves as the crisis gets worse. MP1 is interest rates. This is the first line of defense. Lower rates to make buying cheaper. But what happens when rates hit 0%? You can't lower them anymore. The tool is broken. You move to MP2, quantitative easing. This is what we saw in 2008. The central bank prints money and buys bonds. This pumps cash into the financial system. It saves the banks and boosts stock prices. But, and this is a big but, it often fails to reach the average person. It pushes on a string. That leads to MP3, direct coordination. This is the final frontier. We saw this during COVID. The central bank and the government worked together to put cash directly into people's pockets, stimulus checks, helicopter money. When the other tools fail, you have to bypass the financial system and go direct. Now, there's a fork in the road. The path you take depends entirely on your currency. The deflationary template happens when your debt is in your own currency and you have a reserve currency, like the US dollar. Look at the comparison between the US in the 1930s on the left and 2008 on the right. The patterns are identical. Because the debt was in dollars, the Federal Reserve could print dollars to fill the hole without destroying the currency. In 2008, they did this much faster than in 1930, which is why the recession was shorter. They applied the beautiful deleveraging principles effectively. But what if you are not the United States? What if you owe money in a foreign currency? This is the inflationary template. Look at the chart of the German mark in the 1920s. This is a nightmare scenario. Germany owed huge war debts in foreign currencies. To pay them, they printed German marks. But when you print money to pay a foreign debt, the value of your currency collapses. This creates a doom loop. The more you print, the less your money is worth, so you have to print more to buy the same amount of foreign currency. This leads to hyperinflation. In this scenario, policymakers are handcuffed. They cannot stimulate without destroying the currency. This causes social chaos. And that brings us to the human cost. You cannot separate economics from politics. When the economy crashes, the pie shrinks. People start fighting over the remaining scraps. We see internal conflict. As the text says, the gap between the haves and have-nots explodes. This leads to populism. In the 1930s, this gave us FDR in the US, but it gave us Hitler in Germany. The economic stress acts as a radicalizer. We also see external conflict. Nations turn inward.
They erect tariffs. They start trade wars to protect their own industries. This is exactly what we call beggar thy neighbor policies, and it usually makes the global depression deeper and longer. I want to step back for a moment. If you look at the day-to-day during a crisis, it looks like the apocalypse. But look at this chart. This is real GDP per capita over 120 years. See those red bars? That's the Great Depression and the financial crisis. Visually, they're just blips on a massive upward curve. Productivity is what matters most. Credit cycles move money around, but productivity, learning, inventing, technology, creates money. Over the long run, our ability to do more with less drives our standard of living. The debt crisis is a painful adjustment, but it does not stop the engine of human progress. So if you're a policymaker, an investor, or just a citizen trying to understand the world, here are the 4 principles of navigation. 1. Don't let debt rise faster than income. It sounds simple, but greed makes us forget it. 2. Don't let income rise faster than productivity. If you pay people more than the value they create, your country becomes uncompetitive globally. 3. Balance the levers. Remember the 4 tools? If you only use austerity, you will cause a depression. If you only use money printing, you risk inflation. You need the mix. And 4, act boldly. Look at that exclamation point. History teaches us that in a crisis, policymakers are usually too slow and too hesitant. It is far better to do too much stimulus than too little. I'll leave you with this final thought. The economy is often described as a mystery, a beast, or a force of nature. But as Ray Dalio puts it, it is a machine. It is complex, yes, but it is driven by cause and effect relationships. If we study these templates, if we understand the difference between a deflationary crisis and an inflationary one, if we recognize the bubble indicators, we don't have to be victims of the cycle. We can anticipate it, prepare for it, and navigate through it. Thank you for your time.